Parlor, Bedroom and Bath was Buster Keaton's third starring feature for MGM. It had been filmed previously by MGM in 1920 as a silent picture, but after a recent successful revival of the show on stage, the studio purchased the talkie rights to the play, along with one of its stars, Charlotte Greenwood. The play was a bedroom farce, and Keaton objected to being cast in it. He didn't like farce, and more importantly, he felt his screen character was wrong for it. But when MGM put Buster under contract in 1928, they only hired him as an actor and not for his creative talents. In the contract brief, it states, "Motion picture actor exclusively for the producer in starring roles only. Artist to be consulted as to story, opposite lead and secondary characters of importance, but producer's decision final." The studio pointed out that Buster's first two sound features made more money than any of his silent work, and therefore they knew what was best for him. Moreover, they reminded him, the producer's decision is final. Buster dutifully went to work on Parlor, Bedroom and Bath, but first convinced his bosses to film the exterior scenes at a place Buster loved, his home, 1004 Hartford Way, Beverly Hills, the Italian Villa. The opening shots of Parlor, Bedroom and Bath give us a spectacular view of the backyard of Keaton's estate and a sense of what it must have been like during the many parties held there. This is the view that graced the postcards of Hollywood homes. Passers-by would stand and gawk at this sight. The front of the house was rarely pictured, since it could not compete with the grandeur of the staircase. Of Buster and the house at this time, actress Louise Brooks said, "Buster's whole life then was a movie. His house was a set, the swimming pool was a set, the barbecue pit was a set." Buster was married to Natalie Talmadge, sister of the famous actresses Norma and Constance Talmadge. The Italian villa was built for her. Construction on the house took place from 1925 and into 1926. It was finished while Buster was up in Oregon filming his masterpiece, The General. It was designed by architect Gene Verge with input from Buster and sat on approximately 5 acres of land in Beverly Hills. The house cost $200,000 to build and another $100,000 to furnish. It had 20 rooms that included a kitchen, living room, formal dining room, a combination screening room game room, 5 bedrooms, and 6 baths.
Natalie and Buster had separate bedrooms, and therefore they also had separate baths. And Natalie, being a short person and very petite, the fixtures were made to her size. So if a normal person goes in there, they have to bend down a lot further to use the sink, or squat a lot farther to use the toilet. So when it came to renovation, those fixtures had to go. They just weren't going to fly for any future owners. And in this shot taken during the restoration process, this is Buster's shower. A few years before renovation took place, Portland Mason was having a toilet replaced that was just off the foyer. It was an original toilet from when the house was built, and it just wasn't doing the job anymore. So she was having it replaced, and the workman said, "So lady, what do you want us to do with the toilet?" And she said, "Well, just throw it away." And as they were carting it away, she realized, wait, don't throw away that toilet. And the guy goes, "Why?" He goes, "Do you realize how many famous butts have sat on that toilet? It would be Charlie Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, Tom Mix, Douglas Fairbanks, and a whole slew of celebrities who had come and gone out of that house over the years with the many owners." And the guy couldn't figure out what she was going to do with it, but Portland Mason just took it home with her and put it in front of her house by the front door and turned it into a planter.
There was also additional space for the servants. On the grounds was a swimming pool with cabana, a garage with rooms above for servants, and a little building by a retaining wall that Buster used as an editing room to cut his films. Adjoining Keaton's property was the home of cowboy star Tom Mix. Nearby were the homes of Charlie Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, and Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. In the year 2000, while the villa was undergoing a much-needed restoration, Buster's oldest son, Jimmy, visited the house. He recalled a day when a car coming up the drive struck his dog. The dog was mortally wounded and yelping in pain. As Jimmy ran down the driveway, a shot rang out. Tom Mix had fired a rifle from his bedroom window to put the dog out of his misery. Jimmy also recalled a little black and yellow Austin Bantam car that they used to drive around the grounds. And then, one day, it just wasn't there. The car was used in the movie, and we see Buster drive out of his driveway onto the sidewalk of Hartford Way. We also get to see why the car disappeared. It has been suggested that MGM had actually purchased the car for the film, but let Buster use it before it was demolished. Buster also built a miniature version of the villa as a playhouse for his two boys. In Parlor, Bedroom, and Bath, we get to see Buster being chased around the yard near the playhouse. Another of Buster's touches can be seen in this scene in the hotel room. As if to ensure that there is no hanky-panky, the photograph on the dresser is Buster's wife, Natalie. In the life of a house, Buster's stay was relatively short. He moved in at the height of his career in 1926, but within the next 6 years, Keaton lost creative control of his films, his marriage disintegrated, and his drinking went out of control. In 1932, Natalie divorced him, and he left his beloved Italian villa forever. Since the house was a gift to Natalie, she was awarded ownership of the villa and also custody of their two sons, Jimmy and Bobby. She changed her sons' names from Keaton to Talmadge and sold the Italian villa for a fraction of its original cost to the dance team Fanchon and Marco. The villa passed through many hands over the years. Other owners included Barbara Hutton and Cary Grant, as well as the Libby Glass family. In late 1940, James and Pamela Mason purchased the home. Each owner made changes to the house to suit their tastes, but the biggest change came during the Masons' stay. They renamed the driveway Pamela Drive after Pamela Mason, and the address became 1018 Pamela Drive. Much of the land was sold off, including the swimming pool, reducing the property to 1.5 acres. A chain-link fence was simply put up across the beautiful stairway to divide the property. Over the years, trees and shrubs swallowed the steps that are still there. Soon after Buster's divorce, he was fired from MGM. He was reduced to making cheap two-reel pictures and taking small roles in feature films. In the 1940s, he went back to MGM as a gag writer. He put together a stage act recreating some of his famous routines and toured the US and Europe. He would also do the same in the early days of television. In 1940, he married his third wife, Eleanor, and things were going well. One night in the 1950s, they went to the Coronet Theater for a viewing of The General. The manager of the Coronet, Raymond Rohauer, recognized Keaton and they began to chat. Buster invited Rohauer over to his house to see the junk he had in his garage. The junk turned out to be many of Keaton's silent films. Rohauer took the lead to salvage the films and get them transferred from explosive nitrate stock to safety stock.
So Rohauer goes over to Buster's house the next day. They go out into the garage and there's stacks of film cans. These contain Buster's old silent pictures. Not all of them, but quite a few. And so Buster opens up a few of them and starts to inspect the film. He holds it up to the light and he's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. And now this is nitrate film, which is very flammable. If you've never seen what happens with nitrate film, well, this here is just 3 frames of nitrate film. Can you imagine what that would do to a whole reel if you're holding it, let alone what it will do to somebody's garage? So Rohauer grabs the cigarette out of Buster's mouth and says, "What, are you crazy? That's nitrate." And Buster says, "Don't worry about it, I handle it all the time." Needless to say, Rohauer made sure that Buster didn't smoke around the films anymore that day. So they're going through the films, and amongst the cans is the only known print at the time of Buster's first independent feature film, 3 Ages. 3 Ages is a parody of D.W. Griffith's film Intolerance, in that it tells 3 different stories in 3 different ages of time. And Buster was nervous about getting in the features, so he figured, well, if it doesn't do well, I can always recut it into individual short films and release it that way. But anyway, it was a hit, and the rest is history, as they say. So they pack up some of the films, put them in the car, and they go off to a lab to get them transferred to safety stock. They get to the lab, and Buster stays in the lobby, and Rohauer goes in the back with the guy from the lab. Guy from the lab opens up one can and says, "Whoa, what is this, nitrate? Get it out of here. You trying to blow us up?" And Rohauer says, "But these are Buster Keaton's films. You have to transfer them." The guy goes, "I don't care whose films they are. I don't have to do it. Get them out of here." And Rohauer looked at the guy and said, "Look, that's Buster Keaton out there in your lobby. I'm not going to tell him that you won't transfer his films. You tell him that you won't transfer his films." And the guy wouldn't do it. So he said, "Okay, well, we'll see what we can do." So they took 3 Ages and ran that through the optical printer. Now 3 Ages was getting pretty gummy. As nitrate decomposes, it gets kind of brittle and dusty, and then it starts to form this gum. And then it's really unstable, and the picture's starting to go. But they transferred it, but it was so gummy it ruined their optical printer. And the guy looked at him and said, "You know, we got this one transferred, you ruined my printer, take the rest of them somewhere else." So that's what they did. They took the rest elsewhere, and that's how 3 Ages got saved.
But Keaton didn't own the rights to these films, and distribution would be impossible. After transferring the films to safety stock, Rohauer began working on getting the rights back to Keaton. While Buster had quite a few of his films in his garage, there were still many missing. The films that had been stored in the studio vault had been destroyed either by a fire or because of a malfunction in the climate control system. Enter the Italian villa. Some sources report that James Mason was looking around the projection booth at Buster's old home when he found a secret panel, behind which was a hidden cupboard. The truth is that Buster's cutting room, which by now was being used as a gardening shed, held a secret. 7 years after he moved in, Mason found a metal door at the back of the shed. After moving some things out of the way, he opened it to reveal a film vault that housed many of Buster's missing films, and in some cases, the only known print of the film. There were also some original negatives. Mason eventually donated some of these films to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. After Raymond Rohauer intervened, eventually all the films were returned to Buster, and Rohauer began transferring them to safety stock. Buster's revival was poised to begin. His place in film comedy would be secure. But what about the villa? The Masons went through a bitter divorce in 1964, and Pamela Mason remained at the house until her death in 1996. As the villa fell into disrepair, she would just close off that part of the house. Her daughter Portland sold the house in 1999 to John Bershey and Christopher Bedrosian, who had plans to restore the house rather than tear it down. With all the changes over the years, they realized the villa could not be completely restored to its original glory. Instead, they worked to capture the spirit and feel of the villa that Buster had built with so much pride and hope. The house retains its graciousness, and the grounds are welcoming with the addition of a new pool built in the same shape as the original. Touring the house and grounds today, you come away with the feeling Buster would be pleased. Not only will his films be around for many years to come, but his Italian villa has also weathered the test of time.